Hey there friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Caitlin from Florals.com, and today I am back with the final go-to design series for now. I don't think I have any other go-to designs to share, but if you think I have something different that I've done a lot, or you want more explanation on a certain layout design that I've done before, let me know in the comments down below. I'd be happy to go over more things. These are just the couple that I pulled out to go over because I thought they were the most prominent throughout my designs as of lately or as of the last few years. And I hope you guys find these examples useful and applicable to what you want to do with your layouts. I try to get a lot of examples. Luckily today's is really fun and really versatile, and I even have examples of an 8.5 by 11 and a 12 by 12. Really fun stuff. So let's just dive right in. And if you guys have not seen this series before, I have a playlist called Falling Back to Basics series on my channel right now that you can watch to catch up on all of the fun things we've gone over already. Embellishment clusters, all of the fun things are there. So today's, as you can tell from the title, is a grid design. Now, I thought I had a lot more grids than I did, and I will say some things could fall under grids, some things, you know, it's really up to interpretation, just like all the other designs have been. So I was loose about picking which ones were which. So this was one of the first ones I picked out. I adore this layout. These little photo frames, so cute. But when I made this, I didn't think of it as a grid design. The items aren't touching, but it's a very modular design in general. So I decided to throw it in because who says it's not a grid? It doesn't have to be, you know, 3 by 3 to be a grid. It doesn't have to be 4 by 4 to be a grid. This is a grid that's a little messed up because this one's a little bigger, but generally 3 by 2. And essentially what I'm going over in this is that a grid doesn't necessarily have to be the photos. Like this grid section here is embellishments, it's title. This grid goes a little further this way, this little section goes this way. Everything's up to interpretation. Your stories can be documented however you'd like. I'm just here to provide some insight on some different designs you can do to spice up your albums and to have fun with it. So this was one of them. Using some like Polaroid frames to really dress up a grid design is so much fun. I do wish I had more photos that fit. If you guys don't know, I pretty much exclusively print 4x6 photos right now, so if my photo's not zoomed out, it's never going to fit in these little boxes. But it did on this one, so that's really great. Another thing to acknowledge with grid layouts is that the grid doesn't necessarily have to be a square. So these could be circular photos, and that would work just fine. I don't have any examples of these, so I just wanted to mention it in the beginning that the grid doesn't have to be square. It doesn't have to be circle. It could be hexagons. It could be triangles. It's just a matter of having things in rows and columns in some sort of way. I think if this was just, you know, if this wasn't here and it was just these 4 photos, and the title was like up here or something, it'd feel less grid-like, but I'd still consider that grid because we have this nice tertiary piece here that's very blocked out and very unevenly spaced. Who let me do this? I always find that funny when I go back to layouts. But for example, this layout here, very grid-wise, we have a collage of 4 photos creating this grid that takes up a majority of the layout. And then everything's embellished around that. So we have the title up top, journaling over here, a little something over here for the year. This was my high school graduation, and simple to the point grid. We have the blocks, modular design. These could be round photos, but they're still in a modular pattern. Hopefully that's making some sense. And I will say that it could also be the embellishments that really make the grid pattern. So if there wasn't cat hair on every one of these layouts, it'd be a little bit better. I do apologize. Here we have a wild, wild grid layout. I don't know if you guys remember me making this layout. I believe there's a process video for it. Craziest layout I've probably ever made. I used these tags from Chili Bean Soup to create this grid. And then I filled it in with the photos and embellishments to really round it out. It's very modular. We have photos here, we have a photo here, we have photos in frames, we have photos not in frames. It's a wild one. But if you look at it, we have a column here, a column here, and a column here. And we do have a little bit of separation this way, you know, this is a block, that's a block. Modular in design, but not strict, you know, 1, 2, 3, even rows, even columns. Nothing like that has to be that way. We could also have done just a pattern paper over here with a giant title or giant journaling and just left this side. Still a grid in my eyes. Totally up to interpretation and totally up to you guys to do what you please, but this one was so fun to make. It did take a while of working and, you know, figuring out which of these tags I wanted to back and with what and what pattern. I definitely could have done this layout over again and changed quite a few things, I think. I really just love the photos that fit inside the tags. I think that's amazing. It was so fun. Another example. This one has more cat hair and glue. This one's a picture of my dog. This one, the paper actually serves as the grid. So each of these pattern blocks here serve as the grid. Now this was a sketch that I used as a challenge. Oh, this was probably 2 years ago I made this one, but the sketch has floated around quite a few times in challenge groups and all that jazz. But what I really like about this layout is that even though this is a busy grid, back here there's a lot of patterns going on. The things that my eye draw to most are the colors. So we have pops of yellow here, but that also happens to be sort of the colors that are in the photo. So you're kind of creating a visual triangle within itself. And if you do find that a grid pattern like these ones, which again, very modular, but not exactly the same shape over and over again, because we have some long rectangles, all sorts of things, you can always pop your photo on some foam adhesive like I did here. You could do 1 layer, you could do 2 layers. Whatever gives you enough separation that the photo still stands out without feeling lost in the background of the papers. Now, I will say sometimes it is really hard to mix and match patterns. I believe there's a process video for this, but I can't be certain. A lot of these patterns, I'm not sure, I think this one's in the same collection. A lot of these are from the same collection. The smaller patterns, like this dog one's from its own, this one's from its own, this one's from its own. But for the most part, a lot of these are from the same collection so that it's cohesive without being the same thing over and over again. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I just noticed this one's got a little bit of extra glue hanging out everywhere, but that's okay. But this one, the paper is the grid deciding factor, and the photo fits into the grid, but it's also popped away from the grid to give it more emphasis and more exposure. These little foam thickers are not holding up well. 8.5 by 11. This is a similar concept. I don't know if I ever loved this layout. I believe there's cat hair on this one too, like nobody's business. I don't believe I ever shared this anywhere, maybe on my blog, but this is a photo I took in college, and I made a little grid with all these patterns, black background, you know, edgy, cool, all sorts of stuff going on here, but a simple grid of pattern papers that do repeat. As you can see here, we got some repetition. And then the photo, and then a couple embellishments. Nothing crazy at all. And then we have that fun trim on the side. Nothing crazy, really simple. The paper speaks for the grid. We didn't have to add a ton of embellishments. Simple in my book. This is a simple way to do a grid. It's just small squares, 1 photo, which is exactly what this larger version of that is. So I believe I got the idea to do this from a sketch, but then I remembered I did this one. And I learned from my mistakes with this one to actually try to evenly spread out the grid, because this obviously isn't perfect. And luckily I don't have perfectionism in my scrapbooks. It's just not something I do. But for this one, I inked all the edges to give them a bit more definition and keep within themselves so they didn't, you know, flow off the page. For example, these yellow ones match pretty well with the background. So by doing these inked edges, they kind of keep together. They don't flow off into the distance. So this one, lots and lots of squares. I cut so many. So it's a 6 by 6. That's a lot of squares. No, I did not put squares underneath my photo. With a grid layout, you can generally plan where your photo is going to go. So since this is a 4 by 6 photo, it's generally going to take up 6 squares, since these were 1¼ inch, something like that. I did the math. It's not fun to do the math, but it's important to do the math to figure out how much space you want between all of your squares. But this one's quite complicated and it's quite busy, and I don't do busy all the time, as you saw from some of my other ones. They're a little more subdued, not as busy. This one, so busy, but I still love how it turned out. And I'm sorry the colors are a little extra. Whenever my camera focuses on a face, that tends to happen. There we go. So some primary colors. And again, the spacing's quite a bit better on this one, although there's a couple hiccups like these two, a little bit out of place. But that's fine. It has this edgy look to it due to the inked edges. Some of the embellishments are a little bit, you know, it's fine. Lastly, we have another grid-styled layout. This one's a bit different. It's a double page, so I'll start with this one. This is the right-hand page. Now, this is when we adopted our 2 cats. This was their little, this is when we met them, I guess I should say. We didn't get to take them home this day. Or did we? No, we didn't. This was not that day. But here we have 4 photos in a collage sort of setting. Now, collages and grids are very similar and can be intertwined depending on what you think of them, depending on how you visualize that kind of thing. I would consider this one a collage. However, it does have 3 columns. So really up to you, but I put it in the grid one just for another example that was a little bit different, and how you can spread a grid across 2 pages, but having it be a little different. So this is kind of what they look like together. I'll collapse them down here so they both fit. But for this example, it's only 3 photos. You know, we have 2 rows in this case. So this kind of helps with this one. So these mimic each other in that they both have 2 rows. While this one does have some extra columns, this one only has the 2 columns, so quite a bit different. This one's more of an abstract sort of grid design, and again, very collage-like, you know, putting all the photos together to create one block. Sort of like stack design, but as you can tell, these ones are not nearly clean edges with all these, you know, this one's like a plus sign, this one's a pyramid shape. But that's the tip, major tip for when you're making layouts. Just simplify things into shapes. So for example, this one I said was a plus sign, so we'd probably want to embellish below and above it or left and right of it, but not all 4 necessarily, because that would be implicating a circle versus a plus sign. There's all sorts of things you can think about. And again, depending on your design, depending on your stories, obviously mine aren't built to have tons and tons of journaling on them. So your grids might have big chunks for journaling. Pocket page cards can work in grids just as well. If you're having trouble with grid layouts, you could even grab a pocket page insert and sort of, you know, measure around. Do I want 3x4 cards along the background? That's an easy way to do a grid as well, because they would be in rows and columns. And they could be offset slightly, but there's still that row aspect or there's still that column aspect that gives it that modular design. But in all of these examples, they at least have one or the other, rows or columns, or both, which is perfectly fine. That sort of dictate that modular, like, this is a grid. But I hope you guys have tried one of these layouts out before. But if you have not, highly recommend it. And if you've tried it with squares before, try it with something else. Like I said, I don't have an example of that. But you could try it with tags. Like, this is not squares, for example. This is a very free-form grid design, but take up the whole page and see what you can do with it. See what you can fit on there. Like this one has, 5 photos on it. Of course, some of them are smaller than others, but 5 photos, that's still pretty good for a 112 by 12. But these photos didn't need to be blown up big to tell the story. You know, lots of options, lots of creativity out there. Definitely go research. If you're interested in one of these designs, check out Pinterest, check out Instagram, check them all out, because there's infinite possibilities for a grid. And like I said, they can be loose, they can be, you know, butt up against each other. Tons and tons of ways to do it. And I will be working on some grid layouts to share with you guys this week, and probably a little bit into November, but we'll see what that has in store. I hope you guys have enjoyed the Go-To Design series part of the Falling Back to Basics series. We only have a little bit of time left to go over some more of the basics things, and then we're moving into a new series, which if you guys have any suggestions down below for what you want me to cover in December, January, and February, please leave them down below. I'm in the planning stages right now to finish up that kind of stuff, and I definitely want your input in it. And if you want sneak peeks of that sort of stuff, head over to my Patreon, where you guys can check out more exclusive process videos and get, you know, you're the guinea pigs for these new projects and these new concepts that I'm sharing on my channel are my patrons. They're very, very lovely at looking at things early and looking at things and answering my questions and having polls, and they get to sort of decide which direction the channel goes before you guys even see it necessarily. So definitely check that out if you're interested. But thank you guys again so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more if you haven't already, because you don't want to miss out on the rest of the Falling Back to Basics series. But that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!